Some good news. Google Translate has added 24 new languages to its online translate feature. The new additions include Sepedi and Xitsonga. There's now 133 languages available on Google Translate. Let's talk some more about that and a few other developments with Google SA's director, Dr. Alistair Mokoena. Alistair, thank you so much for joining us this evening. So good to be able to talk about something that really has an eye on the future, if not just the future, on the now.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about this development. I mean, it's not something that you just do overnight. There must have been teams of developers working on this for quite some time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Marcel. So yeah, I'm very excited to be talking about Google Translate. Obviously, it's a free app that people use to translate languages so that they can access information. And we're really excited about the fact that we are now democratizing access to language, to information, to text, even on the internet. And it really is about removing barriers and language barriers and communication barriers. So yeah, there's about 7,100 languages in the world. We now have about 133 on Google Translate. So it's still a small percentage, but there's a lot more to do. And I'm excited because as South Africans, we now have 7 out of the 11 languages on Google Translate, which is about 80% of the population. So you've got languages like English, Afrikaans, Sesotho, Sepedi, Xitsonga, Zulu, Xhosa, which is about 80% of the nation. So really, really excited about this development.
Talk to me a little bit, but in language that myself would be able to understand, about the technology involved in this. Because this can't be very easy. And in fact, in a statement your team released, the senior software engineer with Google Translate said this technology is impressive, but it isn't perfect because this translation facility obviously is not at a level with languages like Spanish and German, for instance. Talk to me a little bit about the science and the technology.
The technology, right?
Yes.
So machine translation technology has evolved quite a bit over the last couple of years, especially with things like deep learning, which has now been integrated with natural language processing capability. Now, deep learning is a type of machine learning technique that allows machines to do what comes naturally to human beings, which is learn by example. So you basically copy and you represent, right? So, and how translation normally works is that we have web crawlers that are looking on the internet for languages, and it's easier if the language is digitized, i.e. on the internet. It's also easier if the language has been translated. So how machine translation works normally is that it works with lots of data sets of parallel text or translated text.
Okay.
So that's easy. Now the limitation is that there's 2 limitations. One is not many languages, especially in the developing markets, are digitized. That's the first problem. We need to get African languages on the net. And very often there's quality issues when it comes to language identification models. So, and then the second challenge is about modeling. So normal translation normally uses 2 parallel text, English and the other language or whatever it's translated into. But when there's only one language or monolingual language, it becomes quite difficult. So we've got this breakthrough technology, called zero-shot machine translation, which basically works with monolingual text. And what we've done is that over the last couple of months, we've been working tirelessly behind the scenes with lots of teams, and we've developed large data sets of monolingual text. And we've been using neural language identification technology to kind of work with it. And what's impressive about it is that it's got 0 supervision. So machine learning can either be supervised or non-supervised. Now here we wanted 0 translation resources. It must learn by itself and produce this thing instantly.
Sure.
So that's why that's so exciting. The problem though is that because there's no human intervention in it, you need to check the quality. So about 100 Googlers who were not part of that original team were asked to come and support and say, listen, do you speak this language? If you do, can you sense check?
Wow.
Can you do quality check? And then we've also been working...
You always still need the humans, don't you?
You absolutely... And that's why I say you should never say machine versus man. It should always be man and machine together. This symbiotic relationship is super, super important. And it's important for us to also keep on working with professors, with linguists, with universities, with community groups, especially indigenous language groups.
And when you're talking about those languages, especially these ones across the continent, there's also a lot of nuance that sometimes is difficult. I mean, I often, if I can't use Google Translate for a Xhosa phrase, for instance, then I always send a voice note or I message my brother-in-law who's from the Eastern Cape and speaks it fluently, and he's like, I can't really explain it. You can't explain it in a written word. I need to kind of tell you what this means. So that makes it even more difficult as well.
Yeah.
But you have to say that this is a step in the right direction for nation building as well, not just in South Africa, but across the continent as well.
You're absolutely right. It drives social cohesion. It breaks down language barriers. I mean, if you go to a foreign country and you can't speak the language, the first place...
For business or for pleasure.
Exactly. The first place you go to is Google Translate, you know, to say, how do you say hello? How do you ask for public toilets and so on? So it's very, very important to just break down those barriers. But I think it's also important for us who speak these sort of local languages to make sure that they end up on the internet, you know, whether it's through blog sites and that kind of thing, or publishing papers. And once it's digitized, it's easy for the web crawlers or the language identifiers to actually, you know, find those languages and actually make them accessible. And also the other exciting thing about this is we've also taken indigenous languages, like, for example, in America, in India, in Africa. We've also taken, you know, sort of Creole in Sierra Leone, and it's now on Google Translate.
Wow.
We've taken big languages like your Twi in Ghana, your Lingala in Central Africa. You know, Tsonga is spoken in about 4 or 5 different Southern African languages. So this is quite big.
And it's huge if you think about it in terms of this overused phrase, cultural currency, as it were. I mean, if you look at just the population of the African continent, I think I saw a number the other day that said there will be 800 million internet users on the African continent by the end of the decade.
Absolutely.
And a third of the world's youth will be found on the continent as well.
Absolutely.
So in terms of the work that Google is doing, letting those 800 million internet users and so many of the world's youthful population to feel seen and heard in this way, I'm sure is only the first of many steps for your organization as it progresses throughout the continent.
Yeah, so I mean, the task itself is quite mammoth. So you need to lay down subsea cables to bring cheap, affordable, fast, reliable internet access to the continent.
South Africans will say we hear you on the affordable.
Absolutely. So,
please.
So in July this year, our Equiano subsea cable is landing from Portugal. It's going to land in Cape Town. We're really excited about that. What that will do is, over 5 years, it will reduce retail and wholesale prices of the internet by about 20%. It's got 25 more kind of, so it's 25 times more powerful than the previous cable. So it's going to be much, much faster, and that's very exciting. But you also need to invest in digital skills training so that people are able to work with digital technology. You also need to work with device manufacturers to bring the prices down. The telcos and government should work together to bring data costs down. So the whole ecosystem has to work together, but language should not be a barrier, you know. So we're fixing language, we're fixing things like local currency so that merchants around the continent can work with our platforms in their own currency. So there's lots of work, but it's exciting. And I think for me, what really brings us home is the fact that Google's mission is to take the world's information, make it accessible and helpful. So this is one way of making information accessible and available by translating it in a language that you feel comfortable in.
Now, you've told us about that cable that's arriving, which is very important news. Hopefully your team will keep us in touch with that development. In terms of the next frontier for you and your team on the continent, I think I saw news about you opening a big software development center in Nairobi just a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
I only know because on Twitter people were saying, now you see, this should have been in South Africa, but government obviously didn't play along, etc., etc., etc. But we play nice. So that's a huge step in that direction, and investing in the youth and making sure that those skills don't always have to be brought in from across the board. What's the next frontier? What are we looking at here?
So what's super, super important about that development, which is a local product development center in Africa for the first time, is that you're going to have Africans developing Google products for Africa, for African conditions to be used by Africans. So there's a lot of intuition that goes into product development, and it can only come if you've got local insights.
Absolutely.
So we're thrilled. And I'm really, really a big fan of moving the narrative from Africa's potential to Africa's opportunity. This is a real opportunity for Africa to compete with the rest of the world, develop product. And I mean, we've led the way in many innovations. If you look at mobile money, if you look at M-Pesa, first in the world.
Absolutely.
If you look at the use of mobile, cell phones, we are the biggest in the world. So there's a lot that we have going for ourselves, and I think companies like us need to invest and really, really take advantage of Africa's opportunity to thrive and really allow Africans to compete with the best in the world. So very exciting times. Very exciting indeed. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for coming in. It's always nice to have visitors in person now that we can do it. That's Google SA's Director, Alistair Mokoena. Dr. Alistair Mokoena, we thank him for his time this evening.